The Face of God, audiobook. Chapter 1, Origin. It was a day that started like any other day before it. I still vividly remember waking up and driving past the eyesore of a trailer park to head off to work, where I counseled young teenagers in my recent undertaking as a social services worker. Having always worked in the automotive industry and managing to get my wife to do the same, albeit at a different employer than mine, I was laid off due to the company pursuing employee work in Mexico. It was pretty good pay and great benefits. My wife had been at her automotive supplier job for a full 7 years within the coming few months, and it was a job she felt appreciated at and enjoyed going to. She genuinely felt like she was part of the team. So, since I was still new at my job and hadn't yet completed my 90 days, she had no issues with adding me to her insurance. I wanted to have an opportunity to look over my list of payable benefits before agreeing to a potentially higher cost of the different types of insurance. I didn't know how much my medical, dental, and vision would be, and Tracy had prices that were locked in for the last 2 years. I was at work and received a call on my personal cell phone when my wife, Tracy, crashed the fork truck she was driving into a pallet of supplier parts that needed to be shipped that day. After she had buried the forks into the wrapped shipping boxes, she fell off the side of the truck and became injured at work. She had struck her left shoulder, her hip, and her left thigh upon impact, and I became immediately worried about her safety. Initially, I assumed her accident was due to extreme exhaustion, causing accidental clumsiness on her behalf, thanks to lack of sleep from our lovemaking session the night before. She worked first shift at a locally owned industrial machining shop as a self-described Jill of all trades. I remember laughing to myself as I fielded the call on my lunch break from her boss, still doing my best to stifle the sound as I smiled and nodded, thinking this would just be another day in the life of Tracy Jeanette Miles. However, my generally innocent chuckling to myself would not only be short-lived. It would bring upon the kind of self-damnation nobody wants to admit they felt for even a moment. She had been driving a fork truck and passed out while it was in drive as she was switching pallets of material. A partial rack of recently welded parts were damaged beyond recognition, as the forks of the truck pierced through a cardboard box nailed to one of the wooden pallets. Only when she was asked to submit to a drug test, which was per company policy, I was confident she would pass with flying colors. Unfortunately, it was at this very time that the nightmare for her and I would truly begin. We just weren't aware of it yet. I called my team leader and explained to her what was going on, and she told me to go and take care of it, with genuine concern in her voice. I appreciated the gesture and told her that I didn't imagine it would take too long. In the same phone call, I mentioned that I planned on being back at the office as soon as possible to finish speaking with the boys. I arrived at my wife Tracy's workplace within the hour and got out of the car. I went up the front sidewalk and buzzed in on the intercom. After waiting a few moments, I spoke with the secretary and was granted access into the main office. With a smile and a nod, I waved a kind hello to the office lady, who I always found was a pleasant gal. I was directed toward the Human Resources office to assist in picking up my wife Tracy. She sat near her boss Peggy's desk, kind of slumped over and in a non-communicative disposition. "How long has she been like this?" I asked, far more worried about her now than I had been before. "Hard to say," Peggy replied. "I got in late this morning and only just saw the accident firsthand while I was swiping in. It was almost like she went right for the boxes and didn't lower her forks to go into the pallets. Drove right into them and fell off the truck. I yelled real loud before she hit, but she just kept on going." It was definitely a bizarre story, and absolutely strange and out of character for Tracy to act like this. It was worth noting, however, that she looked physically exhausted and seemed really out of it. Seeing her like this made me truly wonder if she wasn't using illegal drugs or if she possibly even had some kind of iron deficiency. My wife's employer had managed to schedule a drug screen the same afternoon she got hurt on the job, so the family doctor was where we were headed next. Once her name was called, I stayed with her through the typical phases of the doctor's office visit, hoping to learn more. After helping her step on the scale, I remained close, and the nurse recorded her weight. When we finally made it into an examination room, she sat down on the table, lined with paper, and got her blood pressure checked. The nurse made small talk as she placed the cuff around my wife's arm. I recall her being very kind and pleasant. "Hi, Tracy, what brings you in today?" she asked, pumping air into the cuff as she prepared the machine for a reading. Tracy still seemed minimally responsive. I waited for her to answer the nurse, but she just kind of sat there staring forward. "Drug test," I murmured. The nurse asked, changing her gaze from Tracy to me. "Drug test. For her employer. There was an accident. Sounded like she fell asleep while driving a Ford truck at work. Just kind of protocol for this type of thing." The nurse finished with the blood pressure machine. Results were fairly average and nothing to write home about. She then opened a cabinet and retrieved a urine specimen collection jar. She loosened the white plastic lid and handed it to Tracy. "Are you okay to walk? Can you go to the restroom across the hall and get me a urine sample, please?" My wife slowly turned her head and looked over at me, but said nothing at all. Her eyes looked as tired and weak as she appeared. She closed her eyes and started to slump forward. "This isn't like her," I told the nurse. "She's not typically unresponsive like this." The nurse opened a palm for Tracy to take. "Can you help me walk her to the restroom?" "Of course," I said. I went behind my wife and put my right arm around her waist and then placed Tracy's left hand in mine as we walked her across the hall. "You got her?" the nurse asked, before pulling away to open the door so that my wife could enter. "Yeah, go ahead," I replied with a nod. When the nurse opened the door by pulling it all the way to the left, I entered with Tracy and sat her on the toilet with her jeans still on. "I don't know how I'm even going to do this," I told the on-duty nurse. "I have no idea if she has to go or not." Sitting on the toilet and leaning back after a little more talking and coaxing, Tracy began to wet herself unapologetically. "Shit," I mumbled under my breath as I did my best to move quickly to give the nurse what she needed. I took the collection jar from Tracy and put it underneath her, holding the cup until it filled up slightly past the line that had been made with permanent marker. "Crap, sorry about that. Will it work, though?" I nervously asked. "Should be fine," the nurse replied. "Go ahead and have a seat back in the room while I label it and get it ready for analysis." "Sorry," I apologized again, walking my wife back to the room. She seemed very groggy and weak in her joints. The nurse walked away from us and wiped off the moistened side of the cup. She then began applying stickers to the jar and sealed the canister shut before quietly conversing with our family doctor. "You gotta talk to me, Trace. I've never seen you like this. Are you tired? You just pissed yourself, for God's sake. Can you hear me? Do you understand what I'm saying right now?" Tracy came across as very apathetic and didn't speak at all. She was in no way embarrassed by the spectacle of the wetting of her blue jeans. Honestly, if memory served, she didn't seem aware that she had even wet herself at all. Due to the amount of monetary damage done to company inventory, Tracy's employer also required a blood and hair sample to ensure that not only was she not using narcotics, but that she hadn't used any controlled substances within the past several years. I helped ensure compliance and had Tracy's blood drawn before we left the doctor's office. Our doctor, by the way, seemed very concerned. I mentioned that due to the sudden change in our behavior, Tracy might have an iron deficiency and as such might be anemic. He was very agreeable that this could be the case, and since a blood test was required anyway, it would all be covered under her insurance, minus the $30 copay which her employer would reimburse if it came to light that Tracy was, in fact, not using. I was hopeful to receive word that my wife had simply not eaten much that morning and just needed a few hours more sleep to return to her normal self. I was told that if Tracy's condition didn't improve within the next few hours, to take her to the hospital and have her admitted through the emergency room. Of course, I was optimistic and fairly sure my beautiful wife Tracy would be fine. You know, that this whole thing would all blow over and that we would laugh about it in the years to come. Dearest God in heaven, I had no idea whatsoever that my worst and absolutely most horrific nightmare would begin, and that an emotional roller coaster was about to take us on the wildest ride of our lives. She failed to improve within the next few hours, and even vomited twice in our bed, where she had been placed to rest. I never moved so quickly in my life to call our family doctor to let him know what the situation had escalated into. He instructed me to pack a bag, get everything I needed for an overnight, then to get her out of the house and into my SUV. After buckling her, I threw my door open, hopped inside, and put it in reverse. On the way there, I had rolled my window down to escape the smell of Tracy's vomit-laden breath, only to roll it back up as we drove past the eyesore of a trailer park that sat on what we always joked was some kind of manure pile that, well, never seemed to get shoveled. This trailer park was the epitome of low-class, disgusting, and reeked of affordability. My wife always joked that if I was ever in the doghouse with her, that I could pay to live there for a year on a month's salary. I always laughed at that and remember always telling Tracy that wouldn't happen in a million years. I recall her always laughing and saying, "Well, you better be good to me so you don't have to do that." Not long after that, we made it to the hospital in just over 45 minutes. I had called the front desk to have an attendant come out to the valet area with a wheelchair for Tracy while I parked the car. A nice, clean-shaven man, presumably in his mid-20s, came out in his baby blue scrubs and opened the passenger door. I exited the vehicle to assist him, and once she was seated in the wheelchair, he pushed her up the ramp. I closed her door, and I got back in the car to drive toward the parking garage. At this point, I was absolutely worried sick. Something was off. Something was terribly wrong, and I didn't want to think of what the reasons might have been for her health to decline so quickly, though I found that my head was now quickly filling with educated guesses. She's dehydrated. She needs fluids. That's it. It's gotta be. Once she gets some intravenous fluids injected into her, along with some more rest, she'll be golden. Once I made my way inside the hospital, I walked up to the information desk. "Hello, sir. Welcome to Glenview Hospital. What can I help you with today?" "Yeah, hi. I just had my wife brought in from an attendant about 10 minutes ago." "Could you tell me where she was taken?" "Sure I can. What was the name?" Tracy Miles?" 10 fingers loudly tapped on a hospital laptop keyboard as the desk clerk smiled periodically between looking at the keys and then at the monitor. I stood in front of her desk and waited as she searched the database for my wife's name. She answered an unrelated ringing phone request in front of me, then put the individual on hold before clacking on more keys again. "Bear with me," she said, before pointing a finger at the screen and running it down a list. "Looks like she's been placed in a room. It's room 416, okay? That's going to be the 4th floor, and you're going to go in the left set of double doors. She'll be all the way down at the end." I politely smiled and thanked the woman for her help. As I turned to walk away, I noticed a small bald girl, no older than 7 years of age, wave hello to me with the paw of a new teddy bear, wearing a white nurse's dress with a big red plus sign on the chest. My heart immediately broke for her. She looked like she was a cancer kid. My cell phone rang in my shirt pocket, and I retrieved it immediately. I had to duck into the waiting area adjacent to one of the men's restroom facilities as I still remained on the ground level floor, just feet from the woman I'd just spoken to. "Hi, could I speak with Benjamin Miles?" the caller asked. "Who is this?" I queried, furrowing my brow as I tried to hear the caller through the noise of several hospital guests walking past as they spoke to one another. I bent my form and sat in a small waiting area. "It's Dr. Chet Wilson. Listen, I just got your wife Tracy's urine screen back a few moments ago. Now, to clarify, there are some issues that I want to check and double-check. I understand that she urinated through her jeans on the sample that was accepted. I need to request another sample that won't be tainted with any additional variants. I'm going to check it against the results that I have here in the office. I also need you to sign off on some paperwork to expedite the sharing of her personal information so that she can get the best health treatment possible there at the hospital. Thank you for letting me know that you took her for treatment. Have you heard anything yet?" "Nothing at all, other than the fact that Tracy has a room now," I softly replied. "Well, stay positive. I'll be up to meet you in her room after my office closes for the day. Stay positive. What was her room number, Benjamin?" "It was 416. Try to hurry if you can." With that, he hung up and I took the elevator to the 4th floor. In mere moments, I walked down to the end of the hall and knocked on the door of 416. "Come in," a soft female voice called politely. I turned the handle and pushed against the door, walking slowly inside. Tracy was now fast asleep, laying down in a bed by the window, with a nurse at her side. Tracy had a needle up her right arm being fed a large bag of saline with several other medications to help with her vomiting and need to rest. "How is she holding up?" I asked the nurse on duty. The other bed in the room was empty as the countertop